Hi there. I'm April Callis-Birchmeier, and I'm a certified change management professional, master change management professional, and project management professional. And I wanted to talk with you today about avoiding common change management mistakes. So, how can we avoid these three common change management mistakes? There's three big ones that I run into frequently. I've made these mistakes myself, and I've seen others make these mistakes. And I think it's important to talk about how to avoid these mistakes. And if you step into it and you have this issue, what do you do then? So let's talk a little bit about how important it is as a change management professional and project management professional to really be sure of yourself and to know that you have been trained for this role, that you are prepared for this role, and you don't intend to make a mistake, but mistakes happen to everyone. There's really a few common ones, and they can really undermine your change impact. And so I want to kind of review these and see how you can apply this to yourself. I hope this is helpful to you in your change management career or in your career as a project management professional. So the first one is one that kind of starts with the word assume. And you probably know that when we say assume, you're making an ass out of you and me. And that is an old joke from a 70s sitcom I saw one time. Um, Assuming means that we are not curious, that we are making sort of an assumption about something. And so the first mistake that I have made myself at times, you may have made this mistake. Maybe you've seen others make this mistake. The first mistake is assuming that we understand the problem. Now, sometimes we have had experience, and it's easier once you have experience to assume that you know what the problem is when you are first approaching a new engagement or a new job, or maybe even just a new project that you've been asked to work on. So I think the first mistake is this assuming that we understand what the problem is and that we know how to handle something before we've really been curious about what's going on. And I think the only way to really deal with and kind of help put the brakes on our tendency to just assume that we know what's happening is to recognize the fact that experience is limiting in the sense that it sometimes tells us that we've seen something before, even when we haven't. One of the techniques that I have developed and that I use frequently to try to help myself not assume that I know what's going on in a change situation or in a project is to tell myself to wait. And it's an acronym: WAIT. Wait. I say to myself, April, wait. Because what happens is when I'm assuming, I start to talk, and I talk a lot, and I won't stop talking because I'm pretty sure I understand the situation. And I want to tell everybody that I already understand the situation rather than being curious, rather than investigating. I am just starting to assume. And I tell myself when I hear myself talking and talking, I say, wait, which stands for why am I talking? WAIT. Why am I talking? And when I say wait to myself and I think, why am I talking? It reminds me that I don't know everything about the situation, that I barely know anything about the situation. And the best thing I can do is listen to understand and be curious. Listen to understand, not listen to talk more. I'd have to tell myself to wait again, but listen to understand and to be curious and to ask why. Why is this happening? Why was that decision made? Why are we going in this direction? Not because I'm assuming I know how to fix it, but because I'm curious, I'm investigating, and I'm genuinely listening, not talking. So if you find that you are in a situation and you notice that you have made assumptions and you are assuming that you understand the problem or the request, and you start talking and talking, I want you to think of me. And I want you to think of me saying, wait, wait, why am I talking? And shut up. Stop talking, listen, and be curious and find out more. The second mistake that I see change management professionals and sometimes project professionals making is our mistake number 2, which is prescribing a solution rather than co-creating. And again, this is something that happens more frequently to people with a lot of experience. There's a danger in having a lot of experience because you start to recognize patterns. But recognizing patterns doesn't mean that everything is always the same, even when it looks similar to something we've seen before. Recognizing a pattern is a clue to what's going on, but it is not signaling to us that this is the same situation we've encountered previously. And so that recognition feeling when we're kind of like, this seems very familiar to me. I think I know how to fix this. I think when we have that thought that we recognize something is very familiar, we have to be on guard for that feeling and say, hey, wait, I am not ready to prescribe to them what they need to do. I have to co-create with them because this is something, even though it looks familiar to me, is an entirely different situation than I've encountered in the past. Even if there are a lot of similarities, maybe it's even the same software and you feel like you're running into the same scenario that you've visited previously. It's a really important piece to be able to pause and recognize that this is not the same. And so the solution that you are going to prescribe to them won't help because they need somebody to listen and co-create. And when I think of co-creating, I think very much back to my youth when I was in theater and we would co-create scenes on stage, which meant that everybody who was together on stage had a part in the scene that we were creating. No one person was able to do it without the others. And I think sometimes, particularly if you are a consultant, there's a sense sometimes that you have to do it alone. You're supposed to show up and cast some magic spell and boom, everything is fixed. And many times as a consultant, you feel like they have selected you because you've had this experience and because they believe that you do have a solution to help fix their pain. But it's important that the people who are in the change effort, the project team that's involved with this change initiative, has the ability to co-create and contribute to the solution, contribute to defining what the problem actually is, and to contribute ideas to solve the problem or just even mitigate the problem, make it a little less annoying, a little easier to take, a little less risky. That kind of co-creation where we're all having the opportunity to input our ideas and our thoughts and some of the maybe previous experiences we've had, we can share with each other and take the best from those experiences and apply it to what we are trying to solve. But a big mistake that can happen to a consultant or a change management practitioner or project practitioner is prescribing and just thinking that we've got it. We know what the solution should be. Just do this and it'll be fixed. And then the third mistake that I've seen occur and that I think is really common for change management professionals is not fighting for sustainability planning. This is a difficult one to talk about because I have been guilty of this myself at times. You know, planning to sustain the change is so incredibly important. And yet I have to say that sometimes we're consultants, we are under pressure ourselves. We are being pushed a little bit by leadership to get the strategy completed, to get the plans completed, to start execution. And we want to plan sustainability. We need to think about sustainability and how this change is going to be sustained operationally once it is finally adopted. And there is a lot of pressure to get back to that later. Oh, we'll come back to that. Or you don't need to do that now. We need to do these other things first. And I have been guilty of this in my career, of not fighting the fight to make sure the sustainability plan has been created and accepted and approved by leadership before I start moving everything else around. And sometimes it just feels like, where's the time to get that done? Where's the time to get leadership to really focus on what sustainability looks like, on what true adoption is, and how we can sustain the change going forward? But if we don't fight for that sustainability plan and that sustainability conversation and real concept, I think we just do ourselves a disservice because we don't have the sustainability plan ready to go and in place when needed to ensure that the change is adopted. I've seen situations where we get completely through the change. We make it through the training. We get through our resistance. People are starting to use the system and there's no sustainability plan in place. And it's just confusion. The pieces that were created for the project are now starting to, need maintenance, need updating, training materials need to be updated. The help desk needs to stay up to date. We have leaders who are not really understanding that this now is their day-to-day work. This change was part of a project previously, but now it's their responsibility. And so taking the time to really fight to do the sustainability plan, to have a transition plan conversation where we identify who is going to do what the project team or the change management team has been doing operationally once that change is adopted. Without having this plan, we're sunk. How are we going to get this change to stay in place? People will start to go back and revert to the previous system or to previous ways of working if we can't have this plan, the sustainability plan in place. And one of the challenges, I think, is what I think is sort of a pseudo project state. So I have one of my students had come to me and said, we're having a terrible time in my organization. We cannot seem to sustain a change. I asked her to tell me about their transition, when they were transitioning from like a project or change initiative through adoption and transitioning to operations. And she said, well, we don't really transition to operations so much. We just have the sponsor of the change just kind of keeps the change as part of their responsibility, their basket of responsibilities. And then because they have, been working on this change for a while, it's a bit of a pet project. And many times that leader will either be promoted to another role or may move on to a lateral position or even leave the organization. And then there's nobody to sustain that change because the sponsor, who knew everything about the change, has not transitioned it to operations. So there's only really one expert about the change. There's one leader who knows that change and knows why that change is important and knows why we need to keep that change in place. And then that person leaves. Now, when they leave for other opportunities, what happens to the change? Nobody owns it. It just withers. So this is a really important piece of our change management strategy, our change management practice, and our execution is to transition and sustain that project with a sustainability plan, execute the sustainability plan, execute that transition so that the operational group now owns the change and can sustain it going forward, can put the resources in place to ensure that updates are made, that any changes that occur because of some sort of adjustments are incorporated into training materials, communication materials, and into system process changes that we've put through. So sometimes we think, gosh, I've made these mistakes. What do I do if I've already made one of these big mistakes? Whether I've assumed that I know the problem, I prescribe a solution, or I don't fight for sustainability. I think as humans, we always have the ability to improve, and we can admit when we make a mistake. And it's a little bit hard sometimes when you are coming in as an expert. It's hard to say, I know you hired me as an expert to come in and help you, but I think I might have, jumped too quickly in thinking that I understood the problem. So I'd like to kind of back up and go do a little bit of a listening tour and make sure that I truly am understanding what's happening. And then I'm going to quote right on my hand, wait, and then put my hand over my mouth when I start talking when I shouldn't be, because I want to ask myself, why am I talking? I am trying to learn and trying to listen. I think when we're coming to prescribing a solution, that mistake happens because we, again, feel like we're recognizing a pattern. And understanding that recognition is the first step of perception, but it's not the entirety of perception. Our perceptual framework is made up of recognition, where we recognize something that we think looks familiar. Interpretation, that's when we interpret what it means to us. And then expectation, where we form an expectation about what we believe will happen based on what we recognize and interpret. And most of the time, we're pretty good with these expectations. We're usually, I'd say, about 99% right with expectations. But on occasion, we are surprised, and what we expect to happen does not happen. And it's this expectation piece that I think prevents us from co-creating with others. It kind of boxes out any other thoughts because we already have an expectation. So refusing to recognize a pattern and then just go right into our interpretation and our expectations, that can really help us to not prescribe the solution, because that's not really our role to prescribe the solution. We're there to learn, we're there to assist, we're there to work with people to ensure that they are able to make it to the future state and to realize the benefits of the change. The third one, boy, that one feel like I have mastered more than the others. and that is the mistake of not fighting for sustainability. I have been guilty of not fighting for sustainability in my career. I have been nervous or persuaded that I don't have time or energy or political support to push for a sustainability plan and to execute that transition and sustainability plan. I have to tell you, though, one of the most rewarding change management engagements of my entire career was rewarding because I did push hard for transition and sustainability. I was tempted to make everybody happy and just quietly pack up the project and start, documenting and writing summary reports. And I thought to myself, this project is a little wobbly. And if I don't push for the sustainability plan and really fight for that sustainability plan and the transition plan to get us into a sustainable state, I'm going to be in a world of hurt in 10 months when I have to come back here and redo much of this. And it gave me courage, knowing that this was the right thing to do for the organization, and knowing that the organization was not going to be able to be successful without a sustainability plan and transition plan, gave me courage and helped me to push on that, despite my natural tendency to say, well, I think everything will be okay. And so I did. I pushed hard and said, no, we need to really build this sustainability plan. And I'm grateful that I said it, grateful that I did it, and so happy that that change was fully adopted and sustained and has been in place for 13 years now. So that's a big deal. So we want to make sure that when we're looking at our areas where we tend to make mistakes, these 3 common change management mistakes are very easy to fall into, but we can fix them. We can resolve our own internal battles so that we are listening rather than talking, so that we have a curious mindset, so that we are able to resist the urge to recognize patterns and prescribe a solution immediately, and that we know that sustainability is worth fighting for. So if you'd like to learn more about how to lead organizational change, I've been around for a number of years, more than 25 years, leading organizational change in actual projects and through many challenging, exciting, sometimes chaotic projects. And I would love to share my information with you and to ensure that you have a full, robust understanding of what to do to lead change. And that is through using the READY framework. So if you'd like to learn more about leading change effectively and becoming a true change management professional, and even earning your CCMP, your Certified Change Management Professional designation, join us for the final cohort that we have that begins September 21st, 2026. We have our final cohort of Ready, Set, Change, accelerated training and exam prep. And we have a number of people already enrolled. We are looking forward to meeting you and helping you to avoid these 3 common change management mistakes. So I appreciate you joining me today. Look forward to talking to you next time. Take care.